When Walmart first embarked on our sustainability journey about 10 years ago now, we found we could really focus on efficiency, and we started to have really quick wins, and we were making a lot of impact really pretty quickly. When it got to the supply chain, it was a lot harder.
Every supply chain has its sustainability impacts. How do you make sense of all of that if you have more than one product? This is really why the consortium was created.
The primary value of being in the TSC is, first of all, being part of the future, helping write and transform how the future is going to happen, how companies like Walmart are going to communicate and track performance in their supply chain.
The only way to see the supply chain is with a lot of data, and to really be able to understand where to focus and where to act, TSC plays a critical role.
The TSC value is the identification of an issue or an opportunity. That's what gives me the visibility to then be able to go into my supply chains and say, what are we doing here? What can we do better? Who do we need to collaborate with to make big progress?
The Sustainability Consortium has created a science-based toolkit for really any company to use.
TSC is in the perfect position to change the industry to be something that's truly transformative.
The TSC and what they offer, and this process that we're all engaged in has the opportunity to transform sort of the supplier and brand and retailer relationship.
This is the group that's going to help you identify issues before they become an issue to you, or they may make you aware of things that you're not aware of.
One of the things that TSC does is it takes across any given product category, it will look and say, where are the biggest environmental or social impacts? And we call those hotspots.
One of the great innovations, I think, of TSC was the development of hotspots. It's a simple way to understand your impacts and to prioritize what you should go after.
It's a laser-like focus, which is hard to get when you're looking at vast supply chains.
If I were a CEO of a consumer goods company, I would really want to know what is going on in my supply chain. And I think the challenge today is that most of them don't.
One of the biggest values that we find in TSC is the opportunity to build these networks and relationships. It's a wonderful venue that you are coming into contact with people in the value chain that you may not be normally coming into contact with.
Collectively crafting a value proposition so powerful that you can incorporate different actors, bring all these different perspectives into the table and devise a solution.
We can devise big transformative change programs working with others that are also looking at the same KPIs, the same metrics. That to me is the power.
It's the collaborations that happen between and among our members that really is driving incredible impact on the ground.
We're starting to see the customer care more and more about sustainability in their purchase decisions.
We live in an age of transparency. People want to know what is in their product, where the ingredients are coming from, how are you actually farming and harvesting those ingredients. So we owe that to our consumers.
If you can really put more sustainable products on the shelves, you can drive the trust that consumers want. They want to know that the products on the shelves from their favorite brands are sustainable.
When I think about companies and their product mix, the value of being able to see deep into their supply chain goes beyond sustainability.
We've always seen sustainability as a lens to help us drive innovation in our company.
There's a growth opportunity if we get this right, if we move in this space, if we address this concern in the supply chain. There will be room for us to grow our business that way.
TSC is a phenomenal undertaking involving over 100 members from all different sectors.
They are uniquely an organization looking across nearly every product category that ends up on a retail shelf.
I'm constantly refreshed with why this is an important place to participate and be a part of this community.
I am betting that it will change the world because there's an imperative to act here, and this is it. TSC is it.
Not only do your customers, your employees, your stakeholders, and your investors like this, frankly, you can't afford not to be a part of this.
Thank you for being here for the launch of our impact report. This is our first impact report. We're really excited. And you all have, hopefully, a copy. There were copies on the chairs. We have more if you didn't get a physical copy. You'll be able to leaf through it and see some things. But I wanted to give just a few highlights before we have Laura from Walmart speak. Laura Phillips will be speaking, and then we'll be doing a panel, which will be led by Andrew Winston. But what I wanted to, oh, here it is. That's the agenda. I was supposed to give you the agenda. So there, what we have coming up next. And our panelists for the panel are going to be Jonathan Atwood from Unilever, Roain Atwood from Wrangler, not related, myself, Laura Phillips from Walmart, and Elizabeth Sturcken from EDF. So I'm going to give you just a very small taste of what's in the report. Those of you who are going to be here tomorrow at the summit, tomorrow we'll go a little more in depth into some of the data, and we'll be using the data in our sessions to try to think about how can we actually do what the report says, which is to work together to drive collective action, to drive impact. So that's we have that agenda for tomorrow, but really for the years to come. But what can I tell you about the report? First of all, I think we first look at consumer goods, and we all know they have a very big impact, but one of the first things that we did, and we worked with McKinsey & Company, who helped us, was to size that impact and say, how big is it? But we also wanted to look at some of the benefits of consumer goods. So the benefits are enormous. I mean, you think of cell phones and refrigerators and air conditioning and shoes. I know earlier today, Jonathan mentioned, the value of hand soap in stopping, from diseases, death of children under 5 in some countries. So we spent a little bit of time on that, but really, we then look at what our agenda is, which is sustainability, and we say, what is the sustainability price tag of all of that? And I think we were all quite surprised to see how large it is, and maybe to others of you it's not so surprising. But if you look at consumer goods as a whole, it's over 60% of greenhouse gas emissions globally. It's huge. More than 80% of water withdrawals, more than 2/3 of deforestation, and on and on. Most forced and child labor is embedded in supply chains, making consumer goods. So, on the one hand, this is huge, right? It's daunting. On the other hand, it's a huge opportunity because it presents possibly one of the biggest levers for driving sustainability globally, if we can actually get this right across all of consumer goods and across all of the impacts. And really, that's why the consortium was created, was to drive more sustainable products, but across the mainstream, all of this. And the report talks a little bit about how we do that. It talks about the importance of, as you see in this chart, that little figure in the middle, the retailer shaking hands with their supplier. This is our focus. This is what we're creating tools for that conversation. But that conversation sends a demand signal. It sends a demand signal for whatever it is that is going to be sold on a retailer's shelf. But importantly, if you get into the business conversation, we can send a demand signal for sustainability to say, I want more sustainable products on my shelves. And that's really what TSC has done. It's taken us 6 years and a lot of effort and all of our members rolling up our sleeves, but we've managed to take sustainability, which is incredibly complex. We've looked at a product level, we've looked at a full life cycle across all the products that could be on a retail shelf, and we've been able to translate that into something that can enter a business conversation, something simple enough to send a very clear demand signal down the supply chain. And that's what enables us today to make this impact report, because we have retailers using our work, our metrics, that send a demand signal, and Walmart really using it at scale to be able to have data and say, what's happening in supply chains? What do we see? So in the report, we'll go into that, but I think I'll just give away some of the very top line. One of the things that we know from our data, but also from other sources, is that most of the impact of consumer goods is in supply chains, upstream in supply chains, or in consumer use, right? It doesn't sit usually with the brand manufacturer. In fact, maybe 10, 20% of the impact might sit with a brand manufacturer. So the real challenge is, how do we begin to drive change on these impacts? And the bulk really are more upstream. How do we begin to drive change on these impacts that can be very far away from the actors that we're talking about? Well, you start by asking the questions. You ask the questions at a full life cycle basis, and you begin to get action to happen all the way across the supply chain. But what we see now is, we see that from the data that it's a big challenge. It's a very big challenge. Most suppliers have very little visibility into their supply chains. If you look at our data, we have many questions asking about suppliers further back in the supply chain. And the bulk of the responses are, more than 50%, I don't know. So this, to me, represents the challenge that we all need to address, which is, the first step is to say, I don't know. The next step is then, how do we begin to get visibility? How do we solve that problem of I don't know? So that eventually we can get to the problem of, how do I get performance? And how do I nudge that performance up? So that's, it's slightly different product category to product category, impact area to impact area, but across the board we see this pattern of a real challenge in visibility. This is one of the things that we need to begin to address. At the end of the report, we do talk about a number of impact areas, but at the end of the report we make a call to action, and really what we see is to move forward on this agenda, to really get more sustainable consumer products on the retail shelves, to get those brands that we love, to get all the products that we love to be more sustainable. We think there's 3 big steps that involve all of us. There's an important step for retailers to take responsibility for the products on their shelves, to start to ask their suppliers questions, to start to drive this demand signal. For the suppliers, there's a very big ask to start to get visibility, to say what's happening in my supply chain. And then once we get visibility, we can start to work on impact and drive performance. But there's also a very big ask to those of us in the nonprofit, the NGO sector, who work with these companies, to create the ecosystem that's supportive, that helps them to drive this agenda, to send that demand signal, to get that visibility in the supply chains. And there's a role for all of us in collaborating with the players on the supply chain to drive this agenda, and for us to work together, to harmonize, to collaborate across our different agendas. And all of that together is really, these are the pieces that come together in the consortium, but all of us have a role to drive this together, to drive the collective action that we need to begin to actually use that lever, which is so huge, to have change happen in that 60% of carbon, 80% of water. These numbers are massive, but through this system, we can drive incredible change. So on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Laura Phillips from Walmart.
All right, good evening. Yeah, thank you, Sheila. No, thank you, Sheila, and great comments, and it's great to be with you guys tonight and be talking about something that's so important and really so much of a culmination of great work from many in the room over the past many years to really get to where we are tonight. So first of all, congratulations to the TSC and to the folks who have done the work on the impact report. I would challenge everybody in this room, read it. It's a great work. It's a great body of work talking about real issues. Share it with your own company. share it with your management team. It really provides kind of a great narrative around the challenges. Share it with your own network. It's public now, and so we should all be talking about this in our own companies, talking about it in our network, tweeting about it, putting it on our blogs, but this is the time to start the conversation, and we now have a great tool with which we can use to start the conversation that really lays out a lot of the challenges and a lot of the facts in front of us. So I want to commend the efforts of all who worked on that, and really challenge us to take it to the next level. So what Sheila had asked me to talk about tonight is, what are we doing with the report, and what are we doing with TSC, and how are we starting to really drive impact with what we've learned through leveraging the KPIs and the work with TSC over the past several years. And so talking about, now we know the challenges, kind of what are we doing about it, and how are we driving it, or the impacts that we're seeing. And so I wanted to share with you a little bit of our story at Walmart and what we're doing and how we're leveraging the TSC and leveraging the data, and also kind of issue a challenge in terms of other retailers as well as suppliers to kind of continue and take that challenge and continue the conversation around the impacts that we can drive with the KPIs and TSC. So a little bit about our journey is we started in sustainability working in this area about 10 years ago. And at the time, 10 years ago, I would tell you we weren't sure what the word sustainability meant. But we knew it was important, and as we started to work on it, we found that we could really drive some big change, especially in our supply chain. We set out with 3 big initial goals, which were 100% renewable energy, zero waste in our own operations, and to sell products that sustain people and the environment. This notion of what is the everyday true low cost within our products was something that we thought was intriguing and was something that we could deliver. We've built our company around everyday low price, which is fundamental really for everyday low cost. And so this notion of what's the true cost was something that we thought we could really take on and really start to understand. As we started to work in the product space, we found that it was quite challenging. Where do we start? What are the metrics? There's so many competing standards and really challenges in that space. It was difficult. And I remember some of the first early meetings that we had with many of you in the room where we'd sit together to try and define the KPIs together, and we really struggled. And so what we knew we needed was a credible source, science-based, had really thorough collaboration to get to the right number and the right level of KPIs, really be focused on the right data that was credible in a unique process of collaboration that then we could use in our supply chain. And that's what we've really found with TSC, and that's what we found with the KPIs. And that's what we're really being able to see the impact. So a little bit about kind of how we use it and why it matters to the business. For us, it's really about business integration. And it was talked about earlier in the day about how do we really drive sustainability in our companies. And I would tell you, one of the key decisions we made at Walmart many years ago was that sustainability shouldn't be kind of a department off to the side, a bolt-on, but that it should be in the business and led in the business, and that we would only know we've arrived when in fact everybody in the room was participating in sustainability. And we had our milestone, we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago where we highlighted associate involvement, and in fact our CEO asked the group, Doug McMillan asked the group, how many of you are on the sustainability team? And a handful of people on my team, myself, we raised our hands. And what he said is, you're wrong. Everybody should be raising your hands. Everybody is on the sustainability team. And that's really what we're trying to drive at Walmart, is that everybody is on the sustainability team. Everybody is the chief sustainability officer. And the most critical, I would argue, players on that team are the merchants, the product development, those sourcing teams. And to get to the point where everybody could be on the team, we had to simplify, we had to give them the tools right in their hands that they could use, and we had to step out of their way, because we couldn't do it for them, they had to do it themselves. The only way we could do that was really leveraging the power of the data in a simplified form like Sheila showed, that we translate and hand over to the buyers, and then we let them do the work and get out of their way. And I would tell you the work that they've done together with a lot of our suppliers has been really outstanding. There's a lot more to do. The challenges are real. They're really big. They're hard to work on. This is a new way of working, but we're encouraged by a lot of the progress that we're seeing. What are some of the outcomes? We have over $135 billion in our operations that are covered under the index. Now that's not our annual volume, so we have a ways to go. We have over 260 buyers that we're engaged with within our operation in terms of learning the metrics, talking about sustainability with their suppliers. And we've seen great results from this. So what's next? I would tell you I'm excited about where we are tonight. It's neat for all of us to be heading over to the Museum of Natural History. because actually this is a time when we can make history. And I would quote my friend Elizabeth Sturcken, who said, "This is it. This is the moment, this is now, it's the big pivot, Andrew. We can't do this alone. It's going to take all of us together." As Sheila said, more retailers, more suppliers, more manufacturers. We've had a great chapter 1, great KPIs, great data. Now is the time for chapter 2. We're excited to be a part of it. We have a lot more work to do together with you. We're excited to welcome others to join in, and we really think that this impact report is a great way for us to really accelerate and continue to drive impact. So thank you guys, and we'll transition over to the panel, and I will introduce Andrew Winston, who many of you know. Andrew is an author of the book Green to Gold and the Big Pivot. He's also a consultant and a sustainability strategy advisor. So help me welcome Andrew, and we will transition to the panel.
All right, well, congratulations. It was funny, I was speaking at an event the other a couple weeks ago. It was my birthday, and they did that. 500 people sang "Happy Birthday," and it made it so much better than, because you're working on your birthday, which kind of sucks. But like, you're like, you know, and you're not with your kids, whatever, and then everyone wishing you happy birthday. It makes it. They gave me a cupcake. I wish we had that. That would have been. Anyways, so I'm not going to say too much. I think we don't have that much time, but we wanted to. I think you heard who was on the panel, but I can introduce them quickly at the end. Is Laura? You met Laura. Who introduced me, and now I'm introducing her, so we're just going to keep going round and around. Jonathan Atwood, who you've seen before, very, very shy. Elizabeth Sturcken. Sheila, you know. And Roain Atwood, brother from another mother, for Jonathan. They're definitely related. But I think in some sense we're all a family. We're all a sustainability family. I just want to start with so the report is great, by the way. You know, you guys really should read it. It's an incredible, very clearly written, which isn't always true in sustainability, and I care about this stuff as a writer. And it covers very quickly and succinctly the scale of the challenge that we're talking about. And then I think some of the true facts about where do we stand, which the TSC has a very unusual position of knowledge on. And I think it was in Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, where he talks about accepting the brutal facts or something like that. And I'm not one who finds those depressing. I think when you see something like half the questions are an I don't know, that's just an incredible opportunity to fill that gap. You know, if this were easy, we wouldn't be sitting here. You know, this would all be done. So I want to kind of start and continue, I guess, the conversation, Laura, that you were starting about your 10 years, and just, you know, you look at these numbers, so there's been 10 years of Walmart and others, but Walmart in particular, you know, putting pressure on suppliers and asking questions, and incredible working groups, constant meetings, tools, data, so much happening, and yet this report is showing that there's still some gaps. So, I mean, what has changed over the last 10 years? Because something certainly has. What do you think has really progressed? Because I guess if there's gaps now, they were probably far worse 10 years ago. So what do you think has happened?
Good. Oh, whoa. Yeah, I think that when we started this conversation, you know, we didn't know what we didn't know. Again, I kind of joked that we didn't know the meaning of sustainability, but I don't think we did. And so we started to have conversations to say, you know, we care about sustainability. We're really, you know, challenged in terms of looking at our supply chain and understanding, you know, supplier, what do you think? What are you doing? What do you care? And couldn't go beyond that. And so really then it's just really helped us start the conversation. So if you kind of look at where we've been able to have conversations with tools, with data that we weren't able to have before. Even just learning what is the KPI, where we may not have the answer yet, but what are we trying to find, has been very helpful in the conversation. We're also collaborating in new ways with partners we would have not collaborated with before, and having conversations with our partners that we would not have before. The results of that collaboration has led to great progress. And I'll highlight some of the work, you know, Elizabeth, we've done with your team on supply chain emissions and what we've been able to achieve together. We would not have undertaken that, you know, hadn't been for kind of this new way of working and new collaboration. There is progress though, and I would say a couple of examples that, you know, particularly have come out of work we've done with TSC and work we've done through what we call the Sustainability Index, which is taking that data into our supply chain. The toy industry has made great progress in packaging. And I think we've seen a lot of that work that's been years of focus with a discussion around packaging and the KPIs that are in the toolkits. We're now see that over 77% of our food business is reporting through the index, and we're now able to track climate, fertilizer usage, water in that industry, and having conversations on inputs in the industry to talk about then what are the outcomes. That's new data that we haven't had, that we're driving change in that industry. Seafood, for Walmart US, that's the first category that we've achieved 100% sustainably sourced. I would tell you, I'm thrilled about that. That's a big deal in a really hard space. Yeah, that deserves a round of applause. And the TSC and the index helped us to get there. And in electronics, the work we've made on Energy Star and what we've been able to do, really passing the savings to customers into their pockets on energy savings, has been real and material. So while I agree there's a lot of challenges still to achieve, we're having the conversations, being able to start something. And we're not looking for perfect. At Walmart, we want to get started. We want to start with small steps, and we want to work our way to the top. And that's encouraging to us.
That's great. It's interesting to hear the progress in toys. I guess there is a lot less packaging, but I find on like Christmas morning, those suckers are still locked in there really tight, and they're tied in there. It's very frustrating at 6 in the morning. So if I think what comes out of the report, as you'll see, is there is this key theme of visibility, especially the further back you go and in certain chains. So I mean, Sheila, you've probably had the longest to look at the report and the longest to think about it. What do you think is kind of the cause? I mean, why is there such a visibility problem? What's the kind of root problem that we're facing?
I don't know if it's I guess I'll say it's an opportunity, really, because I think that for a lot of companies, their first look at sustainability and getting their arms around it is going to start with their own operations. And for many, getting to the supply chain is kind of after they finished their own house. And I'd say, that's true for you all. You tackled, you started to tackle your first 2 goals, and the supply chains are really hard. So I think that the good thing is that we're starting to get retailers like Walmart who's saying, I'm going to take responsibility for my supply chain, and I'm going to tackle that, and I'm going to start asking the questions. So why I think we're here, I actually think we couldn't have been here, even asking questions of suppliers, before we had the last 10 years of companies getting to grips with their own, what's in their own 4 walls. So it's kind of, sustainability advanced is really pushing your supply chain. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think the fact that supply chains have such a huge impact, and we're only just starting to dig into them, means we can make so much change. To me, it's an exciting time.
Well, I think what is exciting is we're entering the phase of knowing what we don't know, not to paraphrase our former Secretary of Defense, but the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. And I think we're out of the unknown unknown phase, which is really important, right? We know where the hotspots are, and we know what data we don't have. Well, so Jonathan, as one of the big brands here, and one with a company with incredibly aggressive, supply chain goals around sourcing, do you agree? Has visibility been a big problem for? You've been now 6 years into the Sustainable Living Plan, trying to hit some sourcing goals. Seems like lack of visibility would be a challenge. Are you finding that, and how are you dealing with it?
No, I think visibility continues to be a challenge. And I've been thinking a lot about it, and we've been talking a lot about it. I think it also comes down to continually creating this, establishing trust with suppliers. At the beginning, there were a lot of questions about why are you asking? And then it was, I don't understand the KPIs and the metrics. And I think that this is actually a huge step forward to say, the more that we kind of mutually understand each other, us and our suppliers, us and our supply chains, I think the visibility becomes less. There's a mutual understanding about what we're striving for here, which is we want good supply chains, we want good value chains, because we want to grow our business. They're going to win, we're going to win. So I think it's an evolving relationship, but I'm also going to tell you that I think visibility, particularly in certain supply chains, is very, very difficult. It's proving to be more difficult, and you think you get it solved, or you think you have a really good idea about what it's about, and then all of a sudden something pops up. And I could talk about a few commodities, but there are several in the commodity space where it's just very, very complicated. We have to spend a lot of time on the ground kind of getting to understand it, work through the issues, and establish that trust with government. And a lot of times it's suppliers and governments. And so it comes back to this trust issue.
Well, interesting you said on the ground. I think Rowan can give some perspective, a very recent trip for how Wrangler has kind of dealt with this question of getting some visibility. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you've been doing lately and how you've been using the KPIs.
Yeah, so actually 2 weeks ago I was in Southeast Asia, 6-city tour, Guangzhou, Ho Chi Minh, Shanghai, Dhaka, Bangladesh, and Bangalore, India, meeting with 80 suppliers deploying the KPIs. I actually had 2 sets of KPIs. I had these legacy KPIs that our VF Corporate has been using, and they're about 300 KPIs. And then I had the TSC KPIs. And let me just say, I was very thankful for the 12 TSC KPIs compared to the 300 legacy KPIs. I had to deploy them side by side. And on this issue of visibility, I think that what I learned from my experience and working with the suppliers pretty much early on was that I needed to establish an authentic dialogue, that I really needed to connect with the suppliers before I engaged them on the actual content. Because we could talk about content all day long, and we should talk about content, it's very important. But I began each session sort of the same way, describing to them what was the motivation for me flying across the world to have this discussion with them. What are the drivers from our retail partners, from our consumers? What are the consumer insights that we're seeing? What's driving behavior? What are the competitor efforts, and what are stakeholders doing to help inform our perspective? And it was amazing. In that 30-minute intro and 12 slides later, I could see these, like, the faces light up in the room, and they're just, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that makes sense. And I realized that they don't often get that viewpoint, that vantage point to our perspective as a brand. And before I was going to start asking them about intimate details about their energy, their water, wastewater, and what have you over a series of KPIs, I really first needed to establish that rapport and that authentic sort of dialogue with our suppliers. So I think that kind of brought the barrier down and allowed for more visibility. I thought going in there, they weren't going to share the information with me because they were too afraid to parse out our percentage of their business. That was like a real fear. I was like nervous that I wasn't going to get through the first 10 minutes of my presentation, but sure enough, that question never came up. But I also shared with them, the things that was motivating our company.
You mean you were talking about this for them to estimate how much of their production was for you?
It was specific to us, yeah.
Okay. I mean, because cost accounting's been around a long time. Like they do it, right? They have to.
Right.
So, what was their reaction to the data you were asking for? I mean, was there that? Well, how would we know? Or we don't know that.
Yeah, I mean, it was mixed from region to region, as you can imagine. But it was fascinating. In some places, there was this high level of aptitude and understanding of the issues. And they're selling into European markets. They're very savvy. They're advanced. They have to follow a lot of certifications. And in other environments and other city locations, we're working with other suppliers. I started to explain air emissions and this complex relationship. And thank you to my working group for letting me just keep driving this air emissions thing. I mean, it was really a hot spot, or it was an issue in the training environment where I had to explain the correlation between process chemicals, VOC off-gassing, SOx, NOx, sunlight making ozone-forming chemicals. And I had a supplier raise their hand and say, well, we do weaving, we don't make SOx. Because hosiery, textile. And I was like, wait, that's not what I'm talking about. Like, it means like just leagues apart in some places of understanding. And so, the work that we do in the working groups, the refining of the KPIs and the guidance from year to year, this is critical stuff. This is no light lift. This impacts and affects a large community of people. And so the clearer we can be, the more accurate we can be, the better.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we're going to take some questions in a few minutes, so people, get ready. I wonder what they thought a Knox was. It sounds like a Dr. Seuss character or something. I think we're talking about, working together in what we, I think, in this room probably take for granted, but it's, relatively new in business to work across lines, to not just have a buyer-seller relationship, but work with your suppliers, work with your customers, and work with NGOs. So we have on stage I guess, an NGO perspective that has been working in the collaboration space, probably more intently. I think there's no better sign of intensity than putting people full-time in Bentonville from an environmental NGO. That's kind of an amazing stat. It's been 5+ years now, probably, maybe more. 8? Oh my God. That means we're all getting older. So can you, Elizabeth, talk a little bit about kind of the need for collaboration, or how do you see that working? I mean, how do we solve some of the challenges that are in this report?
So, did you all hear that Prince died today?
Yes.
What does Prince have to do with TSC? Watch me come up with this one. What that hit me with is that the only time we have is now, and that we need to act now. And I think that if any message comes out of the TSC impact report, that's what it should be. Yes, we have some really huge challenges, we don't know a lot, but there's a business imperative to act. And I think that EDF's over 25 years, I think now, of working with corporations and working with supply chains, we've found three things. The first is science, make it count. And, you know, how do you figure out where your impacts are? TSC, you've got KPIs. There you go. Strategy, make it core. Well, you need to act as a company on your core business impacts. Well, as Sheila said from the report, you know, it's a lot of times it's in the supply chain, way up in the supply chain. And the third thing is systems, make it scale. And I think that it's been slow for EDF to come to this. You know, we've done one-on-one partnerships, and working with Walmart has been great. And you know what? Sometimes working with the largest company on the planet isn't enough. And that is the reality today. And I think there's a business, as I said in that video thing, like there's a business imperative to act. Transparency is coming, and this is the tool to do it, and we need to start stepping forward together.
It's perfect. I was going to bring up transparency. That's, I think, the right word, and we're in this amazing time of the expectations are rising so fast, it seems, and so I feel like there's this tension between, okay, now we know the stuff we don't know, but people increasingly are expecting answers. I mean, yeah. I think it's Earth Day, right, tomorrow. It'll be the 46th. I know that because Earth Day was literally a couple weeks after I was born, and it's been my whole life, Earth Day. And we've been waiting for consumers to care enough to really make their presence known. Do we think that day is coming? Does anybody want to vote yes on the panel, that the consumers are really going to drive questions? Because so far this has really been, I think, fundamentally B2B, the almost entire sustainability movement with categories exclusions. You know, people buy their Prius or organic food, right? There's been a few. Mostly not driven by directly clear statements from consumers. Anybody? I made that a long question to see if people had time to think about it.
Sure.
Sure?
I'll say a few words. I think I might have said it somewhat in the video too. I do think that consumers care, and I think that the millennials care more than the generations previous. So I'm optimistic. What I don't think, though, is that consumers can digest the complexity of sustainability. And, you know, from my perspective, it's hard for a retailer who's willing to spend a lot of time and energy to try to digest the sustainability of 14,000 different products, whatever it is, right? For consumers who their goal in life is not sustainability, to begin to digest that is very, very difficult. So my view is we can expect them to act, but they're not going to act to kind of pick it all apart and really understand it. And what we have to do is, and this is why I so strongly believe in our system, is consumers want their favorite brands, they want their favorite retailers, and they want to trust. They want to know that they've done the right thing and that they're going to take that favorite product off the shelf and feel comfortable that this thing is not destroying our planets or destroying people's lives. And I think that's where we have to get to, is give them that.
Well, you said in the report pretty clearly up front that it being more sustainable in the supply chain shouldn't cost consumers more. I mean, and we talked about that ahead of time. I mean, Laura, do you want to kind of give your thoughts? I mean, Walmart's got very strong opinions about charging
absolutely.
more.
I think what we've seen is that as we look at these challenges in supply chains, that a lot of times there's hidden costs within those supply chains, and there's hidden costs that we can work on together with our suppliers deep in the supply chains, whether that's energy and energy reduction. We're seeing great work there, specifically in China through a factory energy efficiency program, whether that's packaging and working on packaging reduction or input reduction like fertilizer in the ag space. There's absolutely ways to reduce cost with this work, and that really gets us excited because that means we can reduce prices to customers, and that's a great thing. So we're very focused through the lens of cost reduction, and we we see in a lot of cases that's really true. There are some times where there are higher costs, and what we do is work to try and offset those. Now, sometimes it means, would we perhaps pay a little bit more for a product? We might, but I think we're very committed to not charge our customers more for sustainable products because we don't think they should have to pay more. And I think what we've seen is that through collaboration in our supply chains, we can solve a lot of those challenges and we can find other offsets. And we can really make sure that we're not having the suppliers have to choose between a great value and a product that's sustainable in the way that they would want to purchase.
And Jonathan, you said something earlier about when Unilever sometimes pays more, why that comes up or why you would.
Well, I think there are examples when we pay more to establish leadership. And sometimes we have to get into a place where we pay more at the beginning to lead a movement, if you will. And we hope that that's offset by first mover advantage. I could look at cage-free. I could look at a number of places where we were kind of at the front end of these things. It costs more to do that, and then we see a system-wide change. I'm totally agreeing on the consumer front. I think we also know very clearly, at least within our company, but I think a lot of you would have the same, that the doomsday scenario does not work. That the idea that if you threaten people, or that if you paint this picture, if you don't do this, something else will happen, is not a motivator. And that we need to make this a story about that be a part of the optimistic, bright future for the planet and for the kids that are coming next, right? We don't need to charge you more. Have an expectation that we've got your back. Freya talked about the mainstream. We're playing for the mainstream. We're not spending a lot of time at Unilever playing for kind of the super greens, I would say, and we're not spending a lot of time on the deniers. We're spending time on the people that want to be in the story. They want to understand the story. They want to feel good about it. They don't want to pay more for it. And they want the product to perform just as well as another product. They don't want any difference in performance. I mean, that's the automatic. There can be no difference in performance. We think we can deliver that. So I'm very hopeful. I think that middle is 55, 60% of the consumer base. That's the opportunity for all of us. That's the growth opportunity. And growth is hard to come by. Yeah. So that's what we're playing for.
Yeah, I've heard people describe, movement change. 20% are with you, 20% are not. But if you get the 60 in the middle, the 20 that are not really don't have any choice anymore. Like the world just moves. And I think that applies to within companies too, as I see with companies trying to change management or change this culture. Any questions out there? I could call on people. Freya, do you have any questions to cycle back to the beginning of the day? Any billion-dollar questions out there? I know we want to get to the museum. Really? There's like 400 people, not a single question. I can ask more. Yeah, sure.
Christian.
It's more of a statement than a question, but I love Sheila's answer to why consumers don't care about the Earth Day. And I'll tell you why. Because we're talking about Earth and their people.
Right.
We should be calling it People's Day or Sustainability Day. And I think literally we have the power to change that because it's a matter of perception. But that's why we're not talking to the heart of the consumers at this point in time. So if we can change that with the good things that we're doing here and change those messages, and then we're going to engage them into that.
All right, let's rename Earth Day. That's an outcome from this panel. All right. Society Day. Anybody else? Yeah. Right in the middle.
Hi, Jack Leonard from Unilever. A question I've always wondered, and that's for Elizabeth. I've been involved with Walmart since the very beginning, October of 2005. And hearing that EDF was partnering with Walmart was, I think, a total shock to everybody. So it's been 8, 9, 10 years since you've been doing it. What were your expectations then versus what have you learned in working with a company like Walmart now?
That's a good question.
The learnings, I think, can be applied to a lot of different groups, but I think you've been at the front lines, and I don't know if you came under criticism at the time, but it was really a bold move. So what did you learn?
Well, I guess it always was risky, but I think for us, for EDF, there was no hesitation. We kind of created the model of business NGO partnerships in our partnership with McDonald's years ago. And at that point, that was like, it was really risky for McDonald's, and it was really risky for us. And part of the rules of the road that we created at the time because of that was that we don't take money from the companies we partner with, and that's remained to this day. Walmart loves that, you know.
Yeah. Save money.
Save money.
Live better.
But, you know, the reality is that EDF is all about creating environmental benefits. And you know what? There's no better way to do that than work with the world's largest company. Over $500 billion in sales, 100,000 global suppliers. Is it how many millions of customers every week? It's just, the numbers are just stunning. And so if they were willing to act and go big, this was a big bet, right? And it was a big bet to put Michelle in Bentonville years ago. And you know what, I think part of the reason why we've been successful together, EDF and Walmart, is we've been there. It's exactly what you were saying about, it's the relationship building, it's the trust building, so you can do the hard work together, because you know what? It's just hard work, right? You know, right, Zach? It's hard, right, Michelle? It's hard. It's just, there's just a lot of on a day-to-day basis, just a lot of really hard work. But you know what Walmart did that I think is critically important is they set some really big goals. And I'm not talking about the 3 aspirational goals, that's great. But they've set goals along the way that were aggressive yet achievable, and it really stretched them. And I've seen Unilever do the same thing. We've just seen a few companies set absolute greenhouse gas reduction targets, Kellogg, General Mills. And how are they going to do that along with their supply chain? Huge stretch. They have no clue how they're going to get there. And that's the thing you need. You set your sights on that horizon. You work hard every day. You fail at some of the stuff. We've talked about some of the failures in our work. And you just keep at it. And I guess over the years we learned that we're just moving too slowly, that we need to move a lot faster. And I think to circle it back to TSC, that's kind of a real key to moving faster, and it's a real key to scaling. So those 2 things just absolutely have to happen. You've got to have the tools to be able to do that. You've got it with TSC. So kudos to John Johnson and Arizona, and kudos to Walmart and all those who got together in the beginning and saw the opportunity to create something like this, because this is what can drive scale and at the speed that we need it.
So I think John, we'll give, John has the right.
Oh, no.
I've got a question.
Jonathan
He has the right.
Is this on? So, Jonathan, I love, let's publish chapter 1, right? It's done. Let's write chapter 2. And TSC, if nothing else, TSC has been this massively parallel co-authorship project. Everyone in the room is writing chapter 2. So I want to know from 3 or 4 of you, what is the opening sentence? How do we write chapter 2? How do we begin?
That's a great, I was going to basically ask as a final question, everyone say, what do they want this report to say a few years from now, or 3 or 5 years? So that's the same question. So let's just end there. Let everyone take a shot at some version of that. What do you hope this says? Anybody ready with that? You want to go?
I guess it's 2 slightly different questions, because what is chapter 2, and what are the first sentences of chapter 2, and what are we going to say 5 years from now? The second one's actually easier, because what we're going to say 5 years from now is we're going to come out with an impact report, and we're going to have massive impact. We're going to look at those numbers that are 60% carbon and deforestation, and we're going to say we went from having no visibility to this much carbon taken out of the atmosphere, to this much reduction in deforestation, to this kind of reduction in forced and slave labor. So, and I think this group, we can get there. That's really, really exciting. The first sentence, though, of chapter 2 is, it's got to have something about impact. It's moving from, we made the metrics, now we're going to take the metrics and we're going to drive impact.
Okay. Anybody else?
TSC companies grow twice as fast in 5 years.
Love it.
Yes.
Yes.
I'd say success, $1 trillion of sustainable consumer goods.
I think TSC companies have had the highest customer satisfaction and net performing scores of all other companies. Yeah. And we've achieved our $1 trillion in coverage through TSC.
Yeah, I would just say that we've created a seamless network of connectivity to implement best practice, and that there is continuous improvement is well on its way, and we've achieved sort of a milestone in reaching that.
That's great, and I'd add that investors are asking why a company's not TSC if they aren't. That investors actually care. We can dream, right? We're going 5 years out. A boy can dream. So I think that's it for the panel. So and then we have one more comment, right, to close things up. But join me in thanking Rowan, Sheila, Elizabeth, Jonathan, and Laura. Thank you so much for the great closing panel. This was really, really fantastic. Thank you.